Today I have a guest and a fellow YouTuber, Don. We're going to talk about his experiences with little people and Bigfoot. This is kind of a long video, but I hope you guys find it interesting.
My name is Don Schneider, and I live in Illinois. Live in a small community outside of Chicago, about an hour and a half from Chicago. And this account is approximately 59 years ago. I'm 66 now. This happened when I was 7 years old, which would have been 1958. And I'll just go right into the story, if that's all right, Q.
Yeah, that's fine.
I had gone to bed, and this would have been about June, and woke up about 6:30 in the morning. Usually I was up and out of bed by no later than 7 o'clock. And I was just laying in bed awake, sort of daydreaming. And my bed was up against a soft wall, which had a window in it, a little single bed. And I looked up at the window. I had been laying awake for a couple minutes probably, and happened to look up at the windowsill on the inside of my room. And there were two human-like little people. The best way I could describe, they looked like one was maybe 12, 13 inches tall, the male figure, and the female figure couldn't have been any taller than maybe 8 or 9 inches.
Damn, they're small.
And very small. They're small, standing there, just standing on the windowsill, looking at me, both smiling. And it scared the hell out of me. I didn't know what to make of it, and I immediately pulled the covers over my head, and was basically through the covers. I could see the sunlight coming in through my window, basically highlighting the two silhouetted figures. So basically, I'm looking through my covers as I hold the covers over my head, and I could see the two figures, the outline of their silhouette on the inside of my blanket. And I just basically, in fear, just watched them. And then at some point I closed my eyes and just started hoping that the next time I opened my eyes, they wouldn't be there. And I'm probably had to be a good minute, maybe longer. I was basically half sort of sitting up in my bed with the covers over my head, with my eyes closed. And my mom walks in through the door and says to me, "Quit fooling around. Take the covers off your head. It's time to get up." Because she always knew I was already up by this time. So she was probably wondering what I was doing, probably thought I was goofing around. And she even said that, "Just quit goofing around, let's get up." So I got up, and I remember vividly what they were wearing, how they were dressed. They even looked like what I would call fraternal twins. As far as their appearance. And it just, one was the male figure had reddish hair. The human proportions were normal, just like a full-grown human would be. He had a flannel shirt on, like a lumberjack shirt, with a handkerchief, tied around his neck, with the knotted portion in front, with blue jeans, short red hair, and his face was he was Caucasian and appeared to have freckles. And his sister, what I assume was his sister, because her facial characteristics looked identical to his. Also had red hair, but they were pigtails and were braided. And she had this dress on And I remembered it pretty well because at that time in '58, nobody dressed that way, unless you went to maybe a Quaker or Amish village. But it later reminded me of the series on TV called Little House on the Prairie. She was sort of dressed like Laura Ingalls Wilder in that type of old sort of turn of the century dress with sort of like I believe it reminded me of like a white apron type style dress with the big shoulders on it, the big fabric shoulders, and in the high collar. And she was standing right next to him, and they were both looking directly at me when I looked toward the windowsill. And with a smile, both had smiles on their face, and I, out of fear, pulled the cover over my head, hoping they would go away. And that's when I opened my eyes next, when my mom was calling me, or after I opened my eyes and realized they were gone, was a result of my mom walking into my room, telling me to get up, get out of bed.
Did they look like normal humans?
So they, proportion, yes, they were normal in every respect.
Even their face?
Normally, their faces were not, their heads were in normal proportion to their body. It was like if you took a regular human being and shrunk him down to 12 inches. And the girl couldn't have been more than maybe 3 or 4 inches shorter than her counterpart. They stood there on the windowsill just looking at me. And I thought it was unusual because previous to this, my grandfather lived upstairs. And this all happened in a community called Lockport, Illinois, which is about, I want to say, 45 minutes from Chicago. Just sort of south, it would put it southwest, excuse me, of Chicago a little. But it's, Lockport is a fairly big community now, but I remember my grandfather lived upstairs. We were actually living downstairs, me and my 2 sisters and my mom and dad, in a house he built. And he lived upstairs. And he had talked about that he thought he suspected the house had hauntings or ghosts, but he never really elaborated. So being a little kid, I just sort of didn't really have any interest in it and just sort of dismissed it, never really thought about it. And then 2 days, of course, after my sighting, my experience, my sister, my older sister, she was 3, she would have been about 9, 10 years old. She was 3 years older than me. They had given her a bedroom. They had moved her, when we moved into the house, they had moved her into a spare bedroom upstairs where my grandfather lived. They had 2 bedrooms upstairs. Well, 2 days after my experience, my sister came tearing down the inside stairwell, screaming bloody murder, saying that there were little people in her bedroom. And she told my mom and dad, "I'm not staying upstairs." She says, "I refuse to stay upstairs anymore." She says, "There's little people walking around," or she said, "I saw little people in my room." Did
you ever ask her what they look like?
No, my sister, I never did ask her. She, years later, she had a stroke and she's lost the ability to talk.
Oh, that's too bad.
She's aphasic now. But she, strangely enough, I thought it was sort of ironic that my parents took her serious enough. They just basically thought it was her imagination and just decided they would just take her single bed out of the bedroom, and they moved her into my bedroom. And I was afraid to tell her at the time that moving into my bedroom was not the solution, that I had already seen them a couple days previous. So it was sort of something, a secret I kept to myself over the years. I probably well over 40 to 45 years, I kept it secret until I decided to come forward and tell my own kids and my wife what occurred. And, you know, my son took me somewhat seriously. Of course, and my wife did to a degree. I can understand this came with a lot of ridicule, so I didn't really push it with people in my own family. So yeah, that was my first run in, and I remember my grandfather saying a lot of times, even after my sister's encounter, mentioning that he thought the house was haunted, and he attributed it to my grandmother who had passed away before I was born. So I never really expressed to him, because my grandfather was here from he had moved here from Yugoslavia, from the old country, and did speak English quite well, but he was a very, very tough, very hard man. And in telling him about little people could have resulted in him just probably not being too happy with me. So I never really brought it up to him.
So
I didn't, you know.
So seeing videos on my channel about little people, did that make you feel like, holy crap, like other people are seeing these things, or what?
Well, I've known for some time that other people have been witnessing little people. I just felt that seeing the people that have come forward on your channel, it's sort of made it, I don't know, I've come to the realization over the years that more people are coming into public about it. More people are coming out about it. And I never brought it up because, you know, I come from a family, I was brought up in a Catholic family, somewhat religious early on. Things changed dramatically later on after my parents got divorced, but there was sort of a stigma about bringing the subject up. And the more, you know, when the internet, of course, came along, I realized it was happening basically all over the world, not just among the Aboriginal people, but people in all countries have some sort of contact or had some kind of experience with various types of little people. And the descriptions are so varied. It's, you know, it's like getting 100 people together in a room, 100 human beings together in a room, and you have all sorts of size, shapes, and descriptions. So that was my first encounter, and of course my sister's, and then so I was always on the fence about coming out about it. And I saw your channel, of course, and I thought, well, you know, you sort of created a platform for people to bring this out, and I don't fear the ridicule anymore. I'm 66 years old, Q, and I'm a retired electrician, and I've seen quite a lot of what I guess I would say is phenomena or unexplained things that didn't fit into the box. And I felt early on, my experience, sort of even before the internet came about, I sort of did my research about little people, and come to find out where I lived in Lockport was an area went through the town of Lockport. It was called the Great Highway, which was a travel route for basically the Potawatomi Native Americans, but other Native groups traveled through that area, through the Hickory Creek area. And the creek behind my property where I lived at that house, my grandfather had several acres behind the house, and there was a creek that actually was a runoff of Hickory Creek. So it was a travel way, and it was an area, Hickory Creek area, was basically a settlement area for Potawatomis that lived in that area until the Indian Removal Act. They lived in that area, and it was quite a lot of interactions between the people. My grandfather knew about Native Americans walking through that area, and their parents talking about his friends' parents talking about them living in that area before the Removal Act. So that's the gist of my first experience.
Okay,
and
that was cool.
Yeah, I never, later on I read books about, Ireland and leprechauns, and it still didn't fit because the clothing, everything seemed different. So
I got a question. Why did normal looking little people that look like normal humans, why was it so scary?
Because I think I just didn't know how to reference it to anything I knew at the time. To me, I was more not scared in the way that I was fearful, I guess I should say. It was more of a surprise, more than it was something that piqued my curiosity.
That makes sense, man.
I think if this would happen, if it happened later on in my life, I think I would have probably said something.
Plus,
like hello.
You were 7 years old, so can't really blame you.
Yeah, I mean, and then my sister, 2 days later, sort of corroborating what she experienced when she told my parents, sort of confirmed to me that I wasn't the only one seeing them. And then, of course, my grandfather talking about the strange occurrences going on in the house that were attributed to the passing of his wife, and he attributed it to her ghost. I always wondered about that, but
he probably was hearing the little people and thought it was a ghost.
Yeah, I've since this year. Well, it was late last year. Excuse me, late 2017. In September, I happened to be visiting some friends in that area in Lockport, and I decided to take my wife back to my old house, the house I was born in, and show her where I experienced it. And the property hasn't changed that much, but I thought it was interesting that the Potawatomi in that area between the Mississippi and Illinois River and the ones that lived in the Chicago and Lockport region, they had names for them. They called them Pais, was their name for them.
Cool. You did your research.
Which isn't. Yeah, I wanted to look up to see if there was any corollary to anything else I knew, only to find out that because the Algonquin language was very common to a lot of the Aboriginals in the north central Midwest area, the Miami and the Ojibwa had similar names. They called them the Pahisa, which is, the spelling is almost identical.
Interesting.
So, it was quite interesting. I was trying to find a source or an origin of what I was experiencing, and whether, again, it's all speculative for me.
So you had other encounters with the little type people?
Well, it wasn't. I won't call it the other one. I won't call it an encounter. I'll call it an experience, and that's all it was. And it was later on, when I was much older. I was 14, 15 years old, and I was staying at my grandfather's apartment, and he was. What I thought was interesting is he let me stay on the sofa or day bed in the living room, and I fell asleep that evening, went to bed, and at some point in the early morning hours, I don't remember looking at the clock, but I'm going to assume it was probably 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning. I was in that waking state where right before you wake up, and I was starting to wake up, and I was trying to, will myself to wake up. I was trying to snap out of it. I was, and I was laying on my stomach, and I remember raising my head up, and I felt something touching the back of my head. And it was just like a quick, just touch on the back of the right side of my head, on the back side. And something ran, I saw something pass over me, and I looked up. And there's this, again, little person, probably no more than a foot tall. This time it had a hat on, and it's running through the air out my grandfather's bay window, through his apartment window. And it was I believe it was a dream. It was just a waking state type dream. And it was like, wait a second. And I was like, what's going on here? And I remember waking up, and I never said anything to my grandfather about it. He knew that I had a rough night of it, because he asked me how I slept, and generally he doesn't unless he thought something was wrong. And I never told him. I never said anything. I didn't want to alarm him. And it immediately triggered the memory of when I was 7 years old and lived in the house he built. So I never, I always made the assumption, maybe wrongly so, that the little people were somehow tied to him. But I really don't know. I know that when I was 7 years old, I had a rough childhood. And my mom, I'll put it this way, my mother wasn't the most nurturing mother. My mom was a very, very, very hardened woman, very, in some ways people would nowadays call it abusive. And, I come to find out later on that, there's this consistent theme among not just Native Americans, but people in other countries, that these little people seem to come to the aid of children in need, or children that have been either abandoned or in trouble, or who have been mistreated by their parents. So I found this out later on in life. I thought, well, that made more sense to me.
That's interesting, because Eskimo stories say the same exact thing. They'll take kids if they're abused. They'll take kids from abusive families. Those are the kind of kids they'll kidnap.
Yeah, I've heard that. And I always wondered if there was a common denominator for me. My mom was, in some ways, could be very cruel. And, out of respect for her, she has passed on, but it's something it's a memory that always stayed with me. And at that time, as a young boy, the person who always seemed to come to my aid was my grandfather. So I always wondered about that, about the children that in the stories of the Native Americans who had disappeared or had been taken from abusive homes. I always wondered, how that connected with me, and I did find a common thread. So I always wondered about that.
They may have been trying to talk to you. Like when they were smiling, they may have been hoping you'd say something to them, but then you freaked out and they're like, okay, we gotta go.
Yeah, I always, I was at that age at 7, I was always like most kids back then in the 50s. I was always outside. I was enthralled with the outdoors. I was always doing stuff outside. I just had an inherent, just draw to nature, when I was very young, and it continued through my older years and as I got older. But I always thought that my interest in nature, insects, and wildlife was what potentially attracted them to me. But then I thought of the element. My dad was always gone, and my dad could be abusive in his own ways, and my mom was there, and she was, resulted later on in my parents getting divorced. But I always me and my older sister had a very rough time of it. She's still alive. I always wanted to bring this up to her, and I know she remembers it.
Send a link. Send a link of this video to her when I post it.
Yeah, I will. She does have a computer. She has a limited vocabulary of like 2 or 3 words ever since she had her stroke. So she's I think she would be interested in me coming out about it.
Could she type?
Yes, she can type. At least I believe she can.
Okay, that's good. At least she can communicate.
Yeah, she does email, so yeah, she does type.
Okay,
and she's a few years older than me. So I've always wondered about this because I live right in the area I live now. I moved from Lockport, and I live about 130 miles west of there now, and I live in an area where it used to be the Hawaiian Confederation. There were 12 tribes that belonged to this group, and they're all gone now, but they're been relocated to Oklahoma. And I was always thought, well, they all have their stories or their myths, legends about little people. So I always felt that it was something I should pursue just to find answers for myself. And I guess your channel sort of gave me an avenue for that. Yeah.
So if anyone watching knows anything about these type of little people, they'll probably comment and give you some insight.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've seen, the little research I've done, and I've heard of the Pedros, the Prior Mountain little people, the little hairy people, the Pudwudgies, and all the various types. I did live in New Mexico for a little while, and I met some people there that told me about the little people in New Mexico, which I was unaware of. And that was back in 1979. And that's when I started piecing it together that this was happening all throughout the United States and actually in many other countries, if not all. And then I got contacted by a friend, a person I friended on Facebook who happened to be from Hawaii. He now lives in New Zealand. Yeah, and he talked about the Menehune to me, and he explained his contacts with the Menehune, and he, like myself, he was trying to draw some similarities in his experiences with the Menehune, because he claimed that at some point they were no longer solid, and he could see right through them. But as I'm sitting here right now, the two little people I witnessed were as solid as the table I'm sitting at. They were physical. And I'm not saying that they couldn't come from another dimension. All that stuff's I'm leaving on the table because I have no answers. I'm not saying they don't have that ability. I won't say that they're not nature spirits. I won't say that there's not a human aspect to all this or a physical aspect to this. But I definitely feel there's also a spiritual aspect from the standpoint of, we're so human-centric to think that as human beings, we're the only ones that have a spiritualness about us. And to say that other creatures don't is sort of, to me, very egocentric.
So the guy that saw the Menehune, did he describe them as looking like exactly like people or something else?
He described them as not like the little people I saw. He proportionately, he described them differently. Trying to remember back to we just basically had we Facebook messaged, and he had sent me several paragraphs on it. I don't even know if I saved it, but he mentioned that I believe he said they didn't wear a lot of clothes.
Well, it's Hawaii, so I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, they were, like they were wearing, I don't want to say loincloths, but they were wearing like limited clothes, and that they had a feature about them, something about their eyes.
Big,
I do remember that.
Big eyes?
Yeah, their eyes were big, and they had sort of, their eyes were like not a normal color like human beings' eyes are.
Yeah.
Where our eyes are going to either be, brown, blue, hazel, whatever. But, yeah, he was writing a book at the time, so he contacted me, and he wanted to know about my little people experience so he could sort of cover it in his book.
The Menehune, I met people who've seen them, and they sound a lot like the Alaskan little people. Like, they have larger eyes. Like, my friend's mom was nearly abducted by a little, they call them Eminarks in Barrow, Alaska. Or they call it Talvik now. That's what they changed the name of the town. But anyway, a little person tried to take her, and she said it had really big neon green eyes, and it was trying to pull her, and she screamed at it and tugged away when she was 8 years old. And the one feature she really noticed was the large, creepy eyes, which would make sense if they're subterranean. If they're subterranean creatures that live underground, of course, like the large eyes would help with low light vision. You know what I mean?
Well, it makes total sense. And from what I understand, even with the Menehune, because of the vast underground network of lava tubes in the Hawaiian Islands, that they live underground. They have a sort of a side of them that is, if you want to call it extra dimensional or spiritual, where they can sort of like, you'll be looking at them, and he said, at some point I could see through them as they slowly like disappear or evaporated into thin air. And when he told me about it, his name was Lawrence. He said that they appeared in his bedroom and they were actually on his bed.
He'd be an
interesting, I believe he was
person to talk to too, because remember the video I did about the Green Goblin sighting?
Yes.
The kids saw the same thing. They're partially transparent. And that's a common theme. Even in the Red Goblin, the last video I posted about little people, they said they kept going partially transparent and solid. So it's really interesting.
That's exactly how you described it.
It's really interesting that there's all these similarities. It makes me think that there's like a scientific reason for this, like something that we're not getting. You know what I mean?
I do agree with you there, because he did mention that. He says at one point when he first saw them, he said they were solid, and then he could see through them. He could see the wall or bedroom furniture behind them, directly behind them, so he could see through them. And then he said they would get like more solid again, sort of like they were, coming in and out of, becoming more solid in our dimension, and then whatever. But he, when he described it, I was like, I said, well, that's something that I never witnessed, and seems sort of really, really interesting. The fact is too that he said that he did try. Of course, he was a lot older than me when he had his experience. He said that he tried to talk to them. He did say that they have caused a lot of situations in Hawaii where they have prevented bridges and highways and constructions from even occurring because of the bad mojo, or their medicine man, their kahuna, coming forward and saying that the Menehune say that not to build here, and if you still push it, you end up having bad things occur, bad things happening. So he says they do take it quite seriously.
Yeah, the natives in Hawaii, they still bring offerings of food once a year. There's a certain time of year they keep it pretty secret, and they'll go out to where the little people live, and they'll bring them food, make them a meal, and give it to them as a gift, just to be nice to them or whatever.
See, I think there is some kind of a connection here to nature that we as human beings are missing, that Aboriginal people understand, or I should say they don't question whether they understand it. You know, I'm not looking at it through that perspective, or at least I'm trying to look at it through that perspective. But there's this human-centric way that if it's not solid, if you can't feel, taste, and touch it, it's not there, which they've already been able to prove that through, string theory and through physics, that things can exist that our five senses don't pick up.
I think that they're real, but there's like some contradictory things. Like some people can see them, some people can't. And then they hunt and kill animals and eat them. Like, why would they need to eat if they're spirits? So some things confuse me, like people seeing them skinning caribou or walrus and killing whales here in Alaska. But like, they have to be physical. They have to be like beings that eat like us. But at the same time, they know how to do things.
And I think that's where the problem lies, is as human beings, we're putting a formula on the table that says, well, this is how human beings are. And some of the probably most inspiring people I've met have a spiritual side to them that other people, even though they have the spiritualness in them, maybe may not have it or may not display it, or, you have a sense of that when you're around those people. You can sort of sense it, I guess. But, who are we to, I guess, dictate or determine that, if these creatures hunt, they require sustenance, they live in our dimension, that they don't have other abilities? Maybe the question we should be asking ourselves is, what more are little people? What more are they?
Yeah. Yeah, I want to try to meet with, since I'm Native American myself, it makes people more open when I speak to Native people about what they know. And I really want to talk to some Native Hawaiians because the Menehune are pretty famous. But yeah, they're probably more well known than stateside. Than the little people are sort of been suppressed in the 48 lower states, at least in Alaska. When the white people first came here, the loggers and stuff, white workers, would be like, "There is these little people that keep coming up to us. What should we do?" And the boss just told them, "Just shoot them." So the little people would be approaching them while they're cutting down trees here in Alaska, and they're instructed to shoot at them. So they just shot at the little people and drove them out. That's what happened here. That's why
I didn't know that.
That's why they don't like people, because we were complete assholes to them when they first tried making contact with the Western people.
See, and I think too, there's also I always wondered about the European contagion theory. There was a time when in the past that I understood that every Native American tribe had a go-between, a person that dealt with, I guess you'd call it the Bigfoot or Sasquatch people. And then after the European contagion theory, and of course the Western expansion and colonialism got established in North America, less and less Sasquatch encounters occurred. And now, even if there is a higher population of them, they seem to not want any contact with people at all. And I could actually transfer that logic over to little people. How do we know the European contagion theory with measles and smallpox? How many, hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of these unknown other human type beings died from contact?
Yeah, and also they don't like how people look at them like subhuman, or because they know that they're powerful and they demand respect, like the Bigfoot. They don't like that they're looked at as stupid animals or apes or something like that. They're offended by it, and they think they'll be dissected and all this stuff. That's one of the reasons they avoid us. This is coming from the tribes that speak to Bigfoot still, and the monk is in contact with them that I talked to. He's going to take me out to see the Bigfoot in a month, actually. Hopefully I'm worthy of them approaching me. We'll see.
Well, best of luck with that, or best wishes with that, because that's sort of something I do as an interest on the side. It's not really I guess you'd say it's not a obsession. If anything, it's an interest.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. It's one of our greatest mysteries right now.
Yeah, I just, I myself am searching for the truth, to put it in context to understand it for myself. I guess trying to prove it to other people is a failed mission, because people can be foolish, and I think it's each and every person's responsibility to prove it to themselves. From that point of view, I feel I'm more probably trying to convince myself to find the truth in it for me. And I know for a fact that out of respect, when I go into an area, hiking, even to do my research, I sort of take the path that the Ojibwe and the Miami and some of the other tribes that lived in this area were very respectful. And if I feel I'm intruding into an area, I back out. I don't push it. I'm not trying to prove anything. They have, even Sasquatch, if they have this ability, which is they're tied to nature in such a way that the minute you enter a tree line, they know you're there, then you'll never track these creatures. You can only hope. Yes, there's very good potential that they have developed. Maybe they have developed their pineal gland to a degree where, and there's other things going on with their anatomy we're unaware of. But I guess I'm looking at it from the standpoint of not to be threatening. I guess truth and honor, and attempting to stay respectful is foremost in my mind. I think I see among a lot of the Native American First Nations people, they fear some of the little people more than they do Bigfoot or Sasquatch. And I've heard stories about what they can do, what kind of they can create a lot of havoc in your life. And so I think shooting at them would be almost a death sentence for that person.
A native guy here in Alaska accidentally killed a little person, and it pissed the little people off. But he didn't die, though.
I can't imagine how it had to be a heck of a tough life for him, though, afterwards, because
he moved out of Alaska.
That's what was an accident, you said?
Because the little people will skin caribou or reindeer, and then they'll wear the skins and act like they're caribou so they can get right up to them and shoot them with a bow and arrow. That's how they hunt, camouflage like that.
Okay.
And he thought it was a caribou, and he shot it, and it was a little person holding caribou skins over him, and he killed it. And he's horrified when he found the body. He's horrified.
Oh, my God. Well, I guess there is such things as an honest mistake. Boy, that's a really that's a mistake I would never want to make. And I keep hearing about, there's a suppression going on in the United States. It's not in most of your westernized countries to suppress this type of information.
The Hobbit, the Homo floresiensis discovery?
Yes.
That was... The scientists around the world were so furious that discovery took place. They were trying to disprove it so hard. It was like so much anger. It was ridiculous. I watched the unfolding of the proving that it was an actual hominid, and there was so much backlash from the scientific community. They were furious. They did not want to accept it. It was hilarious.
Well, yeah, because it'll change the anthropological, archaeological, and historical narrative on how people evolved on this planet, and you can't have, the academic world doesn't want to upset the apple cart.
In North Carolina, they found little skeletons like the Homo floresiensis, but they completely dismissed it. Said, "Oh, they're children," but they're like, "But the bones are fused." "Oh, they're children," and they just destroyed all the evidence. They refused to look at it.
Yeah, I just recently read about, I believe it was in Montana or Wyoming. It was near, I believe, the Pryor Mountains. This was back in, I believe, the early 1900s. They discovered a cemetery with literally hundreds of corpses of, or remaining skeletons and bones of little people. And they all disappeared. They got a hold of a scientist who then contacted the Smithsonian, and just like with all the giant bones, little people bones of all, the Smithsonian has taken care of all that and have basically carted off all the evidence. So people...
I heard that the burial site was bulldozed up, and the scientists just said, "Oh, it's just children," and they burned all the remains.
Yeah, and that's sad. It's disrespectful to the burial grounds to boot, and then you wonder why, any other human-type being basically has a lot of hatred toward, people in general, humans in general, because they see what, especially with the Westernization.
That's why I think they're real. The little people are real, because if they find evidence, what do they say? "Oh, it's a child," and they just destroy it. "Oh, it's just a child." Don't even look into it.
Yeah, we with Homo floresiensis, they even tried to claim that it had some kind of brain disease or some kind of which made it was an encephaly of their brain, which made their heads bigger. And they tried to say, well, but then, of course, other members of the academic community that were trying to hold to the truth said, well, wait a second. You have too many incidences. This is not just an anomaly. This is happening in every small skeleton we find. And so they knew it was a...
That's called cognitive dissonance, when they just can't accept new information and they get angry.
Yes, because it goes contrary to anything that they were taught. And again, we're taught rote learning. We're taught to basically regurgitate verse and letter what we've been taught in school, not to question anything. I question everything, Q. That's probably something I live by, is to question everything. Don't take nothing for face value. Don't accept anything as truth. Find out for yourself.
Yeah, and the way I look at it is just think for yourself. Don't let other people think for you. Like, just because someone else says something doesn't mean I agree with it. I'm not like, okay, yeah. I think I gotta process it myself. You know what I mean? A lot of people don't do that. Yeah,
unfortunately they don't. And I'm sure there's people that you trust, that you feel are very intelligent and very wise people, have wisdom. And even when those people that I've known in my life that are like that, that tell me this is what we know, this is what we've come to believe or come to accept, I still feel the due diligence is all upon me to be responsible to find out for myself and not to be spoon-fed. I don't care how smart the person is, and I've met people that are way smarter than me, are more inspirational people who have told me things, and I still question it because I feel that I have to do the search for the truth I think is required of every individual on this planet.
You got to be honest with yourself. You got to be honest with yourself too, man. Like, if it makes sense to you, it makes sense to you. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Period. It doesn't matter what the person says.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And, you can't accept it just based on, it sounds good and he's a smart person. So I'll without any, it's a group think. And we used to, in the old days, we called it confirmation bias. Now they call it, cognitive dissonance. And unfortunately, It's because people don't want to be taken away from their comfort zone. And I find life's more worthwhile to me when I'm searching for the truth. As you know, even my own channel suggests, I go out there and not knowing what I'll find, but I feel it's you know, just like with the little people, I had my encounter and my experience. Maybe it propelled me into doing the digging and searching to find out about other people's stories and find out where they line up compared to mine. And even if they don't compare to mine in every way, shape, or form, doesn't mean that I shouldn't attach the same amount of importance to search for the truth as I did for my own situation.
I think another reason why they hide is my mom said that when she was taken by aliens when she was little, and they told her most people, when we try to help them, they'll shoot at us, they scream, they attack us. And then it reminded me of the Kelly Clarksville encounter. You heard of that?
Yeah, wasn't that where they were? They shot at them. They were at the windows.
So the little beings literally just walking towards them, and they just unload on them with like military force, like hundreds of bullets. Like, why? Like, I understand they look different, but it's like
well, who's to say these weren't like android or robotic creatures or android type creatures that were sort of like doing, gathering evidence from a research vessel, from an extraterrestrial vessel from another galaxy. So the thing
that bothered me though is it didn't show, they weren't posing a threat or showing that they're threatening in any way. They're just walking towards them, and they unloaded on them. And a lot of the horror stories I hear about the paranormal on scary channels with people's encounters is literally the being of another type of being just looked at them and they freaked the hell out and they're terrified. Just I understand when they're a little kid, but it's like it just makes me think of bias that people have against other races when they first encounter them, like Black, Native Americans. They think they're subhuman. Just because they're not people, like, we can't just make assumptions that they're evil and scream at them and attack them when they're trying to approach us in peace. You know what I mean?
Yeah. We attach basically a racial content to everything, because as long as the minute it's different than us in any way, shape, or form, to the degree that we can't accept it, we basically make it feel subhuman. We attack it. We try to undermine it, and we did it among our own human races. I mean, I look at it from the perspective of Bigfoot or Sasquatch.
I think that's why they hide, man. Because if we
see us kill people. Oh yeah,
if we can't respect them or look past the fact that they're different and be diplomatic, like with the first contact with the aliens, how the hell are they going to approach us? Like, it's impossible. We're too scary.
Well, can you imagine when the first Westerners, the first Europeans arrived in this continent, and to the present, and all the murders and incest and things going on, or I should say, us killing people and then taking their bodies out to wooded areas and forests to get rid of the evidence. And Sasquatch is standing there, hiding, observing this, looking at human beings killing their fellow human beings. Why would they want any contact with us? It makes total sense. And the little people probably witness this too, but, what if people, especially in our society now with probably more murders and serial killings going on, I think exponentially things have gotten worse as the population has increased. But you have these creatures, and of course we make the mistake of saying that we're human, or we claim that we're the only humans, like we're better, bigger, whatever, smarter than anything else. But what if these cryptids, little people, Sasquatch, are just a different type of human?
Yeah, they probably are.
And people aren't understanding that. we can't even deal with people that are 99.999% like each other because one race is black or one race is Asian, and we can't accept that, that one iota of difference, and so we attack, subhumanize, or we try to eliminate. And so if this is witnessed by these other creatures,
they know we're not mature enough. We're not mature enough to associate with them yet. And they get offended, like, we think they're stupid apes, we think they're stupid animals, but they look at us and like, okay, you guys are the ones who are not ready to meet us yet. Like, we can't meet with you. You're not mature enough yet.
Yeah, we haven't evolved. I don't think we've evolved yet to that point.
Some people have, though. But just not the majority of humanity.
Yeah, and that's what I was just going to say. So I'm sure there are exceptions to that rule, but you're right. I think there is a lot of people, I'd say a good majority of the population that, hey, we're in it for the material. What we can get out of life is, unfortunately, can't take with us when we die. Nobody's recognized that. We're here to accumulate wealth, and we don't care if the other guy gets hurt because of it. And that's how we live on this planet, or I should say, with the exception of the Aboriginal people, most Westernized nations live in that type of. That's their motive and their motive of operating is to accumulate and the hell with the other guy. And unfortunately, I think these unknowns witness this. These cryptids, these little people witness it. They see what's going on, and they unfortunately say, "Well, we don't want to have contact." I think things took a downturn ever since the Western, the expansion. Ever since the colonization, things got worse in this country, and I think if these creatures are living in pockets in various sort of wilderness areas and don't want to be discovered, they have good reason to, and I respect that. And I'm not saying, believe me, that people that have had their encounters with these creatures are like better than the other person or above other people. I think sometimes there are situations which are accidents or chance, and I'm not saying I was an exception by any way, means. I think it was just a situation that occurred, and I think the interest went both ways. They maybe for whatever reason had an interest in me. I'm still trying to fathom that. And so why don't we want to take the narrative from the Native American perspective into account and say, well, they have been knowing about this for thousands of years. Why wouldn't we want to digest this and try to understand this as opposed to just listening to our anthropologists, archaeologists, and academia as though they know everything?
I want to humanize them in my channel. I don't want to make them like demonized. That's one of the things my goals is to make people not be so afraid of them and maybe think of them as another form of people or wise people. Like put them in a positive light instead of this fearful light that a lot of other channels are doing.
Well, they've already done that with extraterrestrials and aliens. They've demonized them to the point that every time you turn around, there's a movie coming on TV about, aliens are attacking the Earth and, the alien invaders, and they're always putting a negative light. I always thought to myself, wait a second. If they're so much further evolved technologically, then why would they not be more evolved spiritually? And that would give them good reason to sort of keep us at a distance when they did come to this planet, to sort of observe us from a distance and sort of realize that we're crazy. So I agree with you there. I think there's too many, not just channels on YouTube, but there's too much movies and information out there trying to hate monger on all these various other human type creatures, because we automatically associate, we don't know them, so therefore we have to hate them.
It's another form of racism.
Oh yes, it is. It is. It's. I'm sure somebody will come up with a term for that someday. crypto racism. I don't know what's. It's sad though. I myself, I go into the woods, and I've been into the woods and forest doing my own research, and have had people say, well, hey, trying to, put the fear into me. What are you going to do? It's always from a negative aspect. What are you going to do if they attack you? What are you going to do if they approach you? What are you going to do? And I'm like, why? You're already thinking in a negative aspect, and you're putting out those vibrations. So these creatures are going to pick this up. They're going to see that you're coming out there with an attitude of fear, an intention of potentially doing them harm, and you're already running through these scenarios in your head. If they come out there and they do this, and I'm going to do that. And I think it creates a lot of negativity, and I'm trying to stay neutrally objective through this whole, my own, search for the truth. I'm trying to stay neutral.
And if they could read minds like a lot of the natives people say, then it would make sense that they can read your intent. Because we don't understand everything, so we don't know if that's possible or not, mind reading. And I think they utilize it. So that's, if you come in with the intention that they're monsters or whatever, then they're not going to want to have anything to do with you.
Well, you can see it in animals, and to claim animals are just 100% instinctual, I think is also a mistake. But you can see with animals, why could a person, I've seen this happen. I had a dog that was part Alaskan Husky and part German Shepherd. And when people walked up to him with no fear, I kept him inside my fenced-in yard. He'd jump up on the edge of the fence, and he'd lick their hands, and he'd want affection from them. And my son had one friend who was fearful of almost all dogs. And my son, he urged him. He said, hey, he says, my dog's name was Max. He says, pet Max. And his friend said, no, I don't want to pet Max. I'm afraid of him. And my son said, no. He says, my son, thinking he knew that his intelligence would basically surpass common sense. He said, no, you'll be fine. He says, Max would never hurt anybody. He said, put your hand up there and pet him. And Max had his forepaws up on the top of the fence, had a chain link fence. And he put his hand up, and now his other two friends were there, and they had petted him already, and they had no fear of pets, of dogs. And his friend put his hand up there, and you could tell he was quaking in his boots. He was shaking. He put his hand up there, and my dog immediately bared his teeth. He bared his teeth like, you don't touch me.
Yeah, so animals, that's a very interesting, I never thought about that. People say, oh, they can smell fear, but what if it's another form of telepathy, and it's an innate ability in nature, and the Bigfoot and the little people didn't cloud that out like humans did, and that's why they're able to sense and hear what our intent is, because they're more in tune with their natural state than we are.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think it's a combination of both those factors. I think they could probably smell it. Like they already proven that your body, when you're fearful or you feel angry, that you produce these pheromones, or these your body produces these molecules. They emit this. What if animals not only fear it, but they have a sense of they can see it. They can see it in their thoughts. That
just
you're
like they
fearful
can see
of
ghosts and shit.
They can exactly. It's very possible that Bigfoot and little people have this ability, and they may have evolved it over a period of time because, they're not subject to the limitations of evolution that our technology has sort of exerted on us.
What if humans who are clairvoyant, what if the only thing different about them is that they're being more natural with themselves? So they're in touch with that natural innate ability that we all have. But then something happens with most people where some part of their mind gets in the way of that because they overdevelop it or are fronting or masking too hard, like trying to be this way or that way, and they're not being their natural selves. Maybe that's why there's clairvoyant people. They're more natural, like they're more in touch with their natural state. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think And I think there's a couple ways to approach it, natural state. I think sometimes living close to nature, being more unified, or being
no filter.
Making the recognition that you're part of everything in the universe, not just on the planet, but you're part of everything. I think that's one way of doing it. If you're living tied to nature, in touch with nature, you're a person that's a very natural person. I think then there's the other side of the coin, where due to trauma, an accident that happens to a person, it triggers that sort of opening of that ability. It sort of pushes that ability. That ability has been masked or suppressed all your life, and then you have a car accident. All of a sudden now you can look at a person and tell if they're sick and why, and what sickness they have. I've heard of people having this ability, or being able to look at a person and realize that person has cancer or a heart defect, or they're clairvoyant. They can tell what's going to happen. Either, I should say, they know that events happen several miles away, even though they have no way of knowing it. So I think there is sometimes trauma will create this. I mean, I always wondered myself if we all do have this ability, but it's been suppressed, or it's been underdeveloped our entire life.
So thinking about this logically, if we could look at the recipe to see how animals and Bigfoot and all these things are able to have these abilities in clairvoyant people, then there should be a relatively logical, simple way to decode it and figure out what we're doing wrong that's not allowing us to see or sense these things, and be able to unlock that relatively easily, because it doesn't seem like it should be too far out of our reach if it's innate. If children are able to still see these things because they did not mask over their innate abilities yet. I think there's something that we're doing that's clouding us, that's stopping it.
Well,
I think it has to do with. I think it has to do with. Think of this: the way that they try to make people conform in order to fit into society. Like, oh, you got to be successful. Oh, you got to do this. You got to act this way. You can't. You have to be PC. You can't offend people. You can't say these words, and all these things. I think make people twist into something that they're not, and to conform. And that might be what the problem is. It makes us unnatural.
I think you hit on something very important there, Q, because I think a lot of people, in a way, I sort of know to some degree that once you enter the education system in this country and you're forced to conform, not just through the education system, but once you enter the workforce, once you enter various stages of what they call an industrial society, what they always call dumbing down, to me, always really sort of meant to me was taking away your innate abilities. I believe we have five senses, but I also believe we have a sixth and a seventh sense, just from my own research. And it ties into what you had said earlier about your telepathy regarding your girlfriend and being able to read her thoughts. I think there's a sense of that children were not inundated the way they are in the Western world and brought up more naturally. They developed a sense quite easily, and they would evolve probably more in touch with the world around them, and it would be very easy to it's sort of interesting that the only time this ability seems to surface in adult humans, at least in the Western world, is when a person close to them, a loved one, several miles away, may die in a car accident or some kind of calamity befalls them where they die. And right at that instant, their counterpart, their husband or wife, brother or sister, immediately knows that something terrible has happened to their loved ones. But imagine if you could have this ability all the time. You could sense that like the Australian Aborigines. When somebody gets lost in the outback, they have this ability to just know. They could be 100 miles away. They just have this ability to know where to look for them. They just know. It's this ability that's been basically we've been taught to forget about it, or we've been dumbed down to sort of suppress this ability because there is no financial material value it can give. But Native Americans even had this ability, and I think some still do to this day. But I unfortunately, I mean, you read the stories about Sacagawea and all these unbelievable feats she was able to perform, sensing people, her ability to smell campfires from literally hundreds of miles away. I mean, if you could develop just your 5 senses, you'd be far more evolved than we are at this current rate.
So Western civilization, or the ability to conform and fit in, is destroying our ability to be in touch with these things. And in order to unlock this part of you, because I'll tell you something I figured out about shamanism. One of the key things that allows people to have abilities is to flow or be free with no mask, no veils over yourself. So one of my friends was depressed, and she was becoming suicidal. I'm not going to say any names, obviously, because that's personal. But I told her, before you kill yourself, you should get in touch with your spiritual side, your spiritual state. So I told her to scream and cry and sob and go into the woods and just act like you have to be alone, because if someone's seeing you, you're going to try to front, you're going to try to act like, oh, I'm not sad. Like, you're not going to want to express your raw emotion. So she had to be totally alone and scream and cry and talk to the spirits, talk to God. And she had profound spiritual experiences because of that. Like, she was all of a sudden out of body in another place, and spirits are like, she felt them grabbing her and stuff like that. And she never had any paranormal experience in her life, and until she stopped pretending to be something she's not and let her true self out. And when she was in that state of oneness with herself, it just hit her like a ton of bricks. Like, those abilities just came into her.
Yeah, see, that kind of sort of self-revelation to her must have made her realize that she was somebody's idea of what she should have been her entire life, whether it be her boyfriend or her husband or her parents, her family. Everybody wants you to be a certain type of individual as you're growing up, and this is really something that is really promoted in Western society. You're being groomed from the moment you're born to become the doctor or lawyer, to carry on the family business. You're being groomed to act a certain way. And at some point in your life, at some point in my own life, my own personal experiences, I had to look in my mirror several decades ago and say, who am I? Who am I? Who is this person who's looking back at me? I did not know who the hell I was. I was everybody else's idea of who I was supposed to be, but I really didn't know myself. And so that's when I started doing this self-searching and said, I've got to find out who I am, what makes me tick, really what my purpose of life is, what my purpose of life is, and find out if this is my true purpose of life is to get rich, get married, have a big family, and just be a fat cat, smoke a cigar, and just tell my friends and neighbors how much I've accumulated and how much everybody in society respects me because I have some form of standing or status, or is there actually an actual purpose to life? Am I missing it by a long shot? And I found out I'm missing it by a long shot. Actually, to me, the purpose of life is to really evolve spiritually, and that's sort of my contention for myself. That's my solution for myself is self-development.
That's the same revelation I came to, actually, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's something that's you can get lost so easily in this world and lose yourself. And many people are lost until they're in their 70s or 80s, or when they're getting close to their twilight years, and then they're realizing they've wasted their entire life on a total stranger, which was
on bullshit that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
On being something that you're not, just to please other people. The only person you should please is yourself. I discovered that who you truly are because I lost myself too. I was raised in a disciplinary center because I was a troublemaker. I got expelled a lot. I was suspended like every day. I went back to school. I was like a fighter, talked smack to my teachers. And I had a lot of visions and spiritual stuff happen when I was completely raw and just like, I didn't give a damn. And then I went to my discipline center. And I was kicked out of my family when I was young, and I was raised there until I was 18. I was like 13 or 12 to 18 or something like that in the discipline center. And it was ran by a Navy SEAL instructor, and it was really strict, and I wanted to get out. So I decided one day, you know what? I'm not going to be good, but I'll pretend to be good so that I can get out of here. So I started to put on this con act, and pretend to be good. And I did that for like 4 years straight. And then when I got out of the discipline center when I was 18, finally, and it was strict. It was like a military boot camp, like the whole time. When I got out, I was like, finally, I could be myself again. And I was like, wait a minute, who am I? I was like, I don't even know who I am anymore. Because before I didn't care. I didn't think about it. I just did whatever the hell I wanted. But then when I got out, I was like, okay, I can do whatever the hell I want again. What do I want to do? Who am I? And so I did some soul searching, and I discovered life is who you are is what you admire. Like I like Lord of the Rings. I like superhero movies and all this stuff. And I realized in order to be at peace with yourself and be comfortable and happy with yourself, you have to be the kind of person that you want to be. You have to be what you respect and what you admire, and that's who you truly are. And also, life is kind of like a video game. When you're leveling up and progressing, like evolution, like you said, that's when it's interesting and fun. And when you're attaining knowledge and growing and moving forward, that's when you're happy. But when you're stagnant, when you're not progressing, it sucks. So you have to be a productive, progressive person. Spiritual evolution, just like what you said.
Yeah, you nailed it. That's pretty much what how I've been looking at life now for several years. When you're stagnant and you're not learning about anything, and that includes yourself, you could be the most selfless person in the world and do things for other people. But if no love or wisdom is gained from those acts, you've learned nothing. You've learned that, to act without expecting reward, I guess, is a major thing in my life. But primarily is, I always thought that I don't look for outside validation, and that's a quote I heard from a Native American mate one day, and I go, that sort of basically puts it in a nutshell for me. In society nowadays, you're geared. You're groomed for outside validation. You want the admiration of others. You want the respect of others. But really, respect starts with yourself. You have to respect yourself. You have to be able to get satisfaction from doing something that you achieved, and then look at it and be satisfied for what you achieved, and not expect anybody from your family or friends group to, give you that validation, that pat on the back. I've always noticed that I felt more happy when as an electrician, even when I completed a project, that only I would get the benefit of knowing I completed it, even though maybe 20, 30 other people gained something out of it and nobody ever said thank you. I felt satisfied when I completed a project. I was able to look at it as an accomplishment. And people need to start doing that in this world, and not just with their physical accomplishments, with their spiritual and their mental and emotional achievements. When they when they pursue something and they achieve it, they need to applaud themselves. They need to get satisfaction out of it. And that's how you will evolve. That's how you keep going from one level to the next level. And it's part of, and what the basis for that foundation is knowing yourself. If you don't know yourself, and to me, I found the best thing that helps me about knowing myself is, to me, nature, because nature to me is a mirror of creation. And so when I look at nature, I'm basically looking back at myself. So when I'm out there in the forest, or I'm out there on a nature walk, or I'm out there just camping, I look at nature and it's sort of a reflection back at me of what I should be trying to do in my life. Because just like with the people that inspire me, the people I try to surround myself with are people that inspire me. Nature, right out of the starting gate, inspires you because it has everything it does is with a purpose. It everything it does teaches you. And so if you look at nature and how it solves its problems, and how there's an equal and opposite reaction to everything that nature does, if you learn from that, it can really solve some problems in your own personal life.
Very good points, man. You're a wise man. You've learned a lot in the last how many decades. You come to some pretty powerful and profound realizations that I don't think most people have.
Well, I'm 66 years old. I've had the benefit of some years, but I've also, I think I come from a place similar to your place. I grew up in a very tough, unforgiving household. It was brutal at times. I was kicked out of my house several times. I remember living out of my car. I remember living off the land and sort of just trying to scrape a living. And I tell my wife these stories, and she finds it almost hard to believe that people would be that way to other people. And so her family sort of took me in and sort of showed me what love really was, and only from love can you gain wisdom. Usually I find it happens. It's sort of like sun and sunshine. You have to, in order to have the rays of the sun, you have to have the sun to produce the rays. That's why I look at love and wisdom. I think they're inseparable. I think you have to have love, and wisdom is like the rays of love. Wisdom comes from love. So if you have love, I think you can really get to the bottom of things, as it were. You can find out the truth. And to me, not the answer isn't listening to channels on YouTube that instigate fear and hate and loathing toward creatures that we know nothing about.
Yeah, we should approach them, give them the benefit of the doubt instead of the doubt first.
Yeah. Yep.
Innocent until proven guilty. Not guilty, kill, and then find out they're good later.
Yeah, it's sad. It's sort of always, even though they claim it's not that way in our system, but it actually is that way. We are guilty until proven innocent.
My plan with the Bigfoot is to humanize them and make people know that they're intelligent and they're people, but the only way to really do that would be to prove that they're real and have them display intelligence on camera. But people already know they exist. I think like 80% of people believe in Bigfoot nowadays.
Yeah, to me it's easier to come out with, Bigfoot encounters and tell people about Bigfoot encounters, I've noticed, than it is about little people. It seems like it's sort of like there was a progression I've noticed in human consciousness. It's like 10 years ago, more people were coming out about UFOs, and UFOs were more acceptable. Now it's been sort of replaced with Sasquatch and Bigfoot. I think the next big sort of revelatory sort of thing will be little people. What kind of like what I have?
Dogmen are even intelligent. I know a woman who's has contact with them, and they're not evil things. They will fight people if they do mean things to them or violate something, piss them off somehow. But generally, they're not going to harm people.
Yeah,
I always find it funny when I hear stories of people seeing dogmen. They're like, I could tell it was pure evil. Like, okay, like why? I don't think anything's inherently evil. That's just me, though.
No. No, I agree with you. I don't think. I think people have the capability to do bad things, which are perceived as evil, and they have the capability to do good things. You know, people go in between those two extremes. I think people, you know, and I'm sure you've met people like that. They're all what I call rainbows and unicorns, and everything's happy. And even when they come across a very terrible thing, it's like, you know, to me, I'm sort of. I'm in the middle there. I try to be neutrally objective, or neutrally positive. I try to be, you know, objective, but not automatically drift over to the, you know, hey, that's bad, that's evil, and it seems to say something about our human nature among most of the industrialized countries. We automatically find, just like YouTube, just like Facebook, sort of shows you this, the raw, naked truth about human beings, that when you have content about, and it's even in Hollywood, about movies and TV shows, if you have content about killing and evil and negativism and bad things, you're going to get more hits, sell more tickets, have more interest. The news, look at the news. You know, you don't, you know, look at the news. 99% of the news is about bad stuff. People don't want to talk about the human condition having a positive side. So if the human condition doesn't have a positive side, then everything that we don't know in this world, including cryptids, all have a negative side, are only negative. And I heard for years how Bigfoot were, you know, they were demons. Bad things. They were, you know, and I had my experience with Bigfoot where I wasn't fearful. It was very scary for me because I didn't know what was going on, but I had one circle my camp for, I want to say, from sunset, from 9:30 till 4 a.m. the next morning. I had one circle in my camp, and there might have been more than one. And I was afraid. I was like, what the hell is going on? It was more fear due to the unknown and then later on, I come to realize they were curious. They wanted to know who this guy was camping in the middle of the mountain, the Black Range Mountains in New Mexico. Yeah, I was in my 20s at the time, and you know, my encounter, you know, I talked about my encounter, and I think the takeaway by some people was that, you know, I think the only thing that kept me probably stable and sane at the time is I'm not going to do anything that could be perceived as negative, or attack them, or scream, or you know, try to scare them away. I figured I just basically sat by my campfire quietly, with my hand, of course, on my buck knife, and my dog next to me, my dog restrained. And my dog actually wasn't, I didn't have to restrain him. He wasn't going after this Bigfoot. And
was your dog scared?
My dog had a deep-throated growl in his throat. He was like letting me know that we weren't alone. But he wasn't going to go out and meet him, and it was like I could tell my dog didn't want anything to do with it. But later on, I come to the conclusion that there was probably more than one, and there was possibly two or three of these things circling me. And, you know, I refer to it as my night of terror, but I know nowadays, here it is 40 years later, and this happened in 1979. If this would have happened in the last 9 or 10 years, I think I probably would have my intention would have been, I'm sitting at the side of a lake, refreshed, and just viewing a beautiful scene. And that would have been the the picture in my mind, and I that probably would have probably been what I would have projected. I would have probably tried to stay centered and not let fear get a hold of me, but still been aware of the situation, have that situational awareness. But back then, I knew nothing about this creature. I didn't know what it was, and basically after looking back on the encounter, I realized, hey, they were just. I walked 11 miles into the wilderness in the Black Range Mountains and camped out in the middle of the mountain valley and got a visit in the, right at sunset. They knew where I was at, and they probably wanted to know who is this human by themselves camping in the middle of nowhere. They probably thought I was, I don't know. I don't know what they thought.
They might have been trying to tell you to go back to, or saying, hey, we're here, like without being overly mean.
Yeah, I think they just wanted to make their presence known, and that was it. And they just probably were wondering what I was up about. And
if you
I don't know.
That's a very peaceful and respectful way to try to tell someone to leave. If they were trying to do that, because they probably we don't want. Yeah.
Yeah, they were circling me, and they weren't like no rocks were being thrown. But, they'd be at my 12 o'clock, then they'd be at my 6 o'clock, and they were within 20, 30 feet of me the whole time, walking around me, total darkness, couldn't see. I was in between the mountain ranges. It was just like if you were no moon and it was overcast. That's how dark it was. I could barely see the hand in front of my face. And they were walking around me and thinking, hey, they weren't fearful of me. They were probably thinking, hey, what's this guy doing out here? Is he running away from something? Is he a hiker who got lost? Were they looking at my dog as a Happy Meal? I don't know. But I come to the conclusion I got out of it without a problem, without a scratch. And that brought me to the conclusion that if they were opportunistic feeders and it was a situation where it was a lone Sasquatch that was injured or diseased, and I wouldn't be here talking about this right now.
I'm glad you have a positive perspective on them without demonizing them. That's very mature of you.
Yeah, there's too many things in this world that are being demonized. I feel, I don't need to add more to it. It's, I just have to turn on the TV or go on the internet and see.
I actually have a Sasquatch encounter too. One.
Anyway. You encountered one too?
Yeah, but I didn't see it. But what happened was I was at a Native American spiritual gathering. I used to go to them a lot when I lived in the lower 48. And it was in Washington State, and I was in the Cascade Mountains. And at night I heard whistling, and it terrified the horses. And I'll mimic the whistling. Hold on. It was like this. It was like... And it just kept doing that long, loud, but more lung capacity than me. It sounded like a lot more force. And it was out in the dark woods. We're at the edge of the forest. And the horses were absolutely terrified of the whistling. I was like, what the hell is this whistling? Like, who's whistling from the woods? And it didn't sound human. It sounded too loud. And so I asked some of the elders, some of the native people, and they're like, oh, that's probably just cougars. They like to whistle. And I Googled how cougars whistle later, and I found out that they don't whistle like that. They just go chirp. They chirp.
They chirp, and, yeah. Cougars chirp also.
So I thought it was a cougar, so I went into the woods in pitch black at night. Well, I heard the whistling, and the whistling stopped, and I heard something circling me. And I was like trying to look if I can see the cougar, because I wasn't scared at all, because I'm kind of stupid that way. I don't really get scared that easily. So I walked straight into the deep black woods, and I had a girl with me. And I know that cougars won't attack you unless if they can from the front, they'll always attack you from the back. So I had the girl facing against my back, facing the other way, so that it would never be able to attack us, because it would just keep circling, trying to find your back. And that was my tactic to go in there. I was going to try to see the cougar. But I heard heavy footsteps going around me, like circling us, and they're so quiet. after we went in the woods. And then later in hindsight, I realized that that was Bigfoot. And I think I don't know why they're whistling, but I think they knew that we're having some kind of native spiritual gathering. They're just letting us know that they were there. And that was it. Nothing really happened.
Yeah, see, that's so, I keep hearing that repeated theme from Native Americans that it's multi-generational, that there's a connection, that almost every reservation in the not just the lower 48, but in Alaska, they seem to have a concentration of sightings or experiences of Sasquatch in and around their reservation. And it seems to be because I think to some degree they feel less threatened. I think also there's that sense that Native Americans know that, hey, we don't go track them, we don't go looking for them. We don't put pressure on them. I always try to let people know when I'm out there researching, I said, I'm researching for evidence of them. I said, I'm not looking for them. I said, the foolishness of even attempting to track them is,
you know what I'm doing?
Is played with foolish, it's just foolish.
I'm trying to make friends with them. That's what I'm trying to do. I want to learn from them.
I hope the best for you. I think there's a possibility there because I think it's doable. I mean, it's been done. I don't think you'd be the first one. I've heard where people have befriended them, and I look at it if what comes from what I'm doing is I develop a sort of a relationship. I have a gifting site right now. Actually, I have 2 gifting sites, and I'm trying to develop a third. But at my 2 gifting sites, I have activity. They're interacting with me.
Damn, that's awesome, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's on my channel, but
You have a YouTube channel?
Yeah. Yeah, I think...
I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, that's
know that the whole time I was talking to you, I didn't know you had a YouTube channel, man.
Well, I didn't want to plug my YouTube channel because this is your channel.
We'll plug your YouTube channel. I don't mind at all, man.
Well, that's up to you. Yeah, my channel's called Illinois Sasquatch.
Oh, I seen your comments. I had no idea that was you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because I was the one that commented under my Illinois Sasquatch.
I forget the names of the people that comment, honestly, because there's so many different wild names. That's cool.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people have that, Bellevue Bigfoot, then you go to their page and you find they have no content. So I have content on my channel. I do a lot of filming out in the wilderness areas. I believe in the closeness of Bigfoot. Unfortunately, in our area, we don't have the Cascades. We don't have the Olympic Range. We don't have mountains like that at all. We have what I call watersheds or what they call green belts of waterways, which are their corridors of travel, and that's where I do all my investigations. And they're close to humans and not afraid of humans, it seems. It seems like they're very well at hiding in these kind of situations in Illinois because of the closeness of human settlements and human activity. They're very adept. They don't have hundreds of thousands of square miles of the Cascade Range to go hide in and not be bothered with humans. Here they've sort of adapted, I believe, or at least the types that live in this area seem to be, people think that when we developed and built houses in Illinois and basically developed the hell out of the state that they went away. No, they did what the coyote did. They sort of adapted to human beings living in their habitat, and people just aren't aware of it. And I myself, I'm trying to develop a trust, and I announce myself when I go into their areas. And I had a friend of mine who does research, Sasquatch research. He says use the Native American words when you enter the area to welcome to let them know you're there.
Awesome, man. That's cool. All right, we're getting on to 2 hours, so we should probably wrap it up. I'm going to have to edit this interview quite a bit take out irrelevant
Yeah.
stuff.
Well, it's nice to get to know you, Q. And I didn't learn how to pronounce your name. Kitavituak.
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 Kitavituak. Kitavituak.
Kitavituak. Okay.
That's close enough.
Okay.
Everyone calls me Q. It's too difficult.
Kitavituak. Okay. Once it rolls off your tongue, it gets easier.
It means the one with the flexible mood.
The one with the flexible mood. I like that.
It's a really old name. It was passed down for thousands of years. All right. Hope you guys found this video interesting. Sorry I haven't been posting lately. I've been busy in real life. I have a guest staying here. You know how it is. It's hard to record and do stuff when you have people visiting. And I've just been busy. I've been going out in the country and stuff. Everything's starting to melt. So, but yeah, I hope you guys like this format where we're having discussion, talking about stuff, or where I interview people. Personally, I enjoy the story and then a little bit of discussion. But I'm still a new YouTuber, so I'm not getting like thousands of stories coming into me. I don't have an infinite reservoir of stories to draw from. So remember, if you had any strange encounters that you'd like to share or talk about, just email me at xenohuntersinfo@gmail.com. More videos to come, guys. This is Kitavituak.